I've got a 2023 Kia Seltos right here in my driveway. You can see it here. Now this car belongs to my neighbor right next door, and she complained about this car not cooling about a month and a half ago, but then it would not come on in the morning times. After the engine had cooled down overnight, the next morning the AC would not come on, but once it warmed up, the engine heated up, it would come on and it would run the rest of the day. So there wasn't no real urgency to look into it. It was an intermittent problem, but now it's quit working altogether. This car's got 120,000 miles on it in 1 year, so it's out of warranty. It's expired due to mileage. So she asked me if I'd take a look at it. That's what I'm doing today. Now I have checked pressure already. I've hooked up gauges. They suspected maybe it was out of refrigerant. I don't know why, but everybody thinks when a car don't cool, it's out of Freon refrigerant. But anyway, I hooked up to it. This is the R1234YF system. I hooked up to it, plenty of pressure. That is not the issue. And this is an automatic climate control, completely computer controlled AC unit. So I think the best place to start would be hook my scan tool up to it, see if it can give me some direction where to start, look for codes, maybe do some bidirectional functions on it, and see what we come up with. I'll be back. I'm going to be using my King Bowling K7 to scan this car with. Alright, I am into the car on my scan tool. I want to go ahead and check for fault codes, but I want to record this on a screen recording by hitting this button here. Alright, we are recording. It'll just make it easier for you to see. Alright, let's read fault codes. Okay, it's showing no fault codes whatsoever. So what we can do from here is back up. Let me see what actuation test this will let me do. Compressor on, compressor off. Alright, let's do that. Let's go to compressor on, and we got to hit the start button. Okay, compressor on. It says result succeed, but guess what? I don't think the compressor came on. I didn't hear it. I'm going to take a camera outside just to confirm and make sure that the front of this compressor where the clutch is not spinning. Alright, so if you're wondering, when you do this, whenever you take a scan tool and actually activate any component on a car that it will let you activate, what you're doing, in fact, is you're bypassing all the other inputs that can control that particular item. In this case, the clutch. There's all kind of sensors. There's like ambient air sensors. There's in-car air sensors. There's evaporator sensors. There's even your engine coolant temperature sensor. If this car was to overheat, it should cut that compressor off. If you go wide open throttle, it will cut that compressor off to give it back that little bit of horsepower that it's robbing. And there's just various things that can cut it off or on. So it's bypassing all of those other components, and you can just scratch them off your list as possibilities. This problem here is between the PCM and the actual clutch itself. The outputs, not the inputs. I just bypassed all the inputs, still not coming on. So let me put a camera on the front of this compressor, and let's make sure this clutch is indeed not engaged. The computer thinks it's up and running, but obviously it isn't. And once I confirm that, we'll go ahead and pull up a wiring diagram. Compressor's still not on. All right, I've been looking at this diagram here for around the last 5 minutes or so. And what I'm noticing right off the bat, the first place I went was I found my clutch, since this is what is not turning on. This clutch is not engaging the compressor. So I followed it out to see what controls it, and there is an A/con relay here. The control side of this relay, right here where the coil is, it's getting us hot through this 10 amp fuse coming through. Now this ground is in fact being controlled by the computer. it is switching the ground on and off as it calls for cool right here, which energizes this relay and allows voltage to pass from this other 10 amp fuse in and through the blue wire. But if you notice, this is hot all the times. It's originating from the battery, not the computer, so it's just getting voltage in. Once this relay is energized, it continues this voltage through the blue wire straight into the clutch. Now the clutch is getting its ground through the body of the compressor, which in turn, is getting its ground through the engine and back to the battery. Now if you notice, that's a blue wire. These two wires here, this black and green, that is for your electronic control valve at the butt of the compressor. That's all computer controlled. This is a variable displacement compressor, but that has nothing to do with what I'm looking at right now. I'm just showing you the colors. Now, once it leaves this plug, this is representing the plug, these colors are not a sign, no color sign. That's what the NCA means, but I know from already looking that this is a green wire. It goes from blue to green, and then the outgoing side of this clutch coil is red. There's going to be a short red wire with a screw going straight to the actual body of the compressor itself. And that's it. Nowhere on here is there any kind of bias voltage or signal wires coming from the computer. So my point being, the computer has no way of knowing. It thinks this compressor should be on because it knows it turned this relay on, but does it know if it's actually getting voltage through it? Well, obviously not, because it can't communicate to it. Nowhere can I see that on this diagram. So what I want to do is go straight to this blue wire and check for voltage. If I don't have voltage, then we got to back up and check our fuses, make sure this fuse is on. This fuse is obviously good because the computer says this relay is energized, or it thinks so. But if this one could possibly be out, could be a faulty relay here at the contacts, or it could be a bad clutch. All right, let's go outside and see what we find. All right, I tried to back probe this plug. I just could not get my hands in there, so I ended up using a probe piercing tool, and we're gonna look to see if we got voltage here based on what I've seen on the wiring diagram. So I got my power probe. Let's just see. We do. We got 13.9 volts. All right, let me look and see if I got a good ground. Let me see if I can get this power probe down in there. I'll tell you what, this is a tight car. All right, I know you can probably hear that. We do have a ground. That tells me we have an open circuit on that field coil itself. Now I'm going to do one more test just to verify that. I'm going to try to read through the coil and see if we have any continuity. If we don't, then this coil needs to be replaced, but I'm pretty much positive of it right now. Let me see if I can get this plug off so I can get to the terminals. I did manage to get this coil unplugged right there. To the far right is a terminal that goes into the coil, and then the other end of course goes straight to ground, and I'm going to be doing an ohm check on that. Now I don't think I could have got that unplugged without these pliers right here. I'll have a link in the description. Those are made by Lyle, and they're a lifesaver when it comes to hard to get places like this. So I doubt you're going to be able to see what my hands are doing because I got to get my hands down in there, but I'm going to the right terminal on the far right, and from there go to body ground, and we're going to see if we have any continuity. All right, I am on the correct terminal. I'm on a ground. We have an open circuit, which means that this coil has a crack in the wire somewhere, which is starting to make sense because when it was cold would not come on. As it heats up, it would come on. You know, any metal, copper, it don't matter what it is, it contracts and it expands based on temperature. So as this heated up, these two wires had a gap in it, and as it heats up, now they're touching, and it was running, and I'm sure there's some arcing going on in there. So eventually eventually that just quit altogether, and that's exactly what happened. We need a clutch coil. All right, so I'm going to tell the owner to go ahead and try to find a clutch assembly for this. Might as well change it all while we're at it, and that would be a new pulley, a new shoe, and a new clutch coil itself. So I'll get back with you and let you know if she did in fact find one here locally. All right, she did manage to actually get the coil itself, not the entire clutch assembly. Kia sells these out individually, and that would have cost probably around $400 something for a clutch assembly if she would have got the entire thing. I used to work in an AC shop, and we would get aftermarket clutch assemblies that would come all together with the shoe, the pulley, the actual coil, the snap rings to hold it in, center bolt, everything you needed. And she could have probably done that option online, but then she would have had to waited. So the way it is now, we do have the part that's bad. This car is only a year old, even though it does have wear on it, you know, obviously with the miles it's got. But that's what we're doing. I'm just doing the coil. We're going to put the existing pulley on there and the shoe and everything pertaining to that. I'm going to go ahead and get this car jacked up on some jack stands. And I think I can actually remove the tire on the passenger side, remove the fender well, and get access to this compressor without having to pull it. I do not want to open this system up if I don't have to. So let me give that a good shot anyway. All right, there it is right there. So it's going to be impossible for me to film up under here and work, but that center bolt is what I'm getting ready to remove. And usually if you have some sort of like pneumatic ratchet or something like that, it'll spin it right out. Otherwise that whole pulley assembly is going to try to turn, because it's going to try to turn the guts of that compressor. But I'm going to get that out, and then I'm going to remove the shoe. That's the shoe. And in behind there is going to be some shims, or I guess you could call them spacers. That's what creates the gap between the pulley and the shoe. And make sure not to lose those, because I'm not replacing the shoe or the pulley, and those have got to go back in there to give the proper air gap. There is the front shoe. Now it's possible that shim could be stuck down in there. Can't really see. Let's get over here in the light. All right, so I got the front shoe off, and if you look right there, you'll see a snap ring. I've just got to take that snap ring off, and that pulley should pull off to me, hopefully. All right, let me go ahead and get that off. All right, we finally got to the coil. There it is right there. There's the new one. Now it's held in the same way, snap ring. There's the snap ring to the pulley. And that's it. You got 2 snap rings and a center bolt. But let me tell you, this job is turning into a bear, man. This thing is some kind of tight. This is normally done with the compressor out, if at all. A lot of people just go ahead and change out the compressor, but this is the only problem is the coil. This car is only 1 year old. I'm going to go ahead and reverse the procedure and get this thing back in. All right, so I can't really show you how to do this under the car. There's just not enough room for me to work and film at the same time, but I can at least explain it to you if you've never done this. This is the first component to go back on the compressor. This is your coil. Make sure your wires are in the up position. And there's only one way this thing can go. It will not go unless you line this up. Right here on the back, you see this little pin right here. There's an indication on the compressor. So when you go in with this, you would push it in and you would turn it until this falls into that indentation, and that's going to have it all the way up against the compressor. Then you would take your snap ring and lock it into place to hold it. Then from there you would slide your pulley over the top of this, lock it in with a snap ring, then put your shoe on, making sure to have the shim. It's really just that easy. Wish I could show it to you. Possibly in the future I'll have a compressor that I can actually remove and do it on the bench, and I can show you every step of it. All right, I'm done. New coils in place, got the old pulley put back, the shoe, the shims, center bolt, got the belt back on. I'm gonna start this up and we're gonna see if this thing will engage. It certainly should. I think yeah, oh yeah, that's cool air coming out of here. Well, heck yeah. All right, all I got to do now is put the plastic pieces back up underneath the car and put that inner fender back on, let the jack down, and we'll be done. Got everything put together. This car is back on the ground off the jack stands. In here running it, look at the temp on it, 38.2. Go down to the vent right here. That's some really good temps. This thing will freeze you out of here. All right, well, it's a shame it only took a year for something to break on this car, but got to consider the miles and things like that. But I'll be right back with you and we'll close this video out. Well, that was a success. I'm telling you, it's pretty difficult when you leave the compressor in place and try to do that. Just trying to get your snap ring pliers in there and getting them back in is the hard part. You got to have a screwdriver and your snap ring pliers and try to get that seated, and then it'll eventually snap in. Took me like 4 attempts on that coil itself. The pulley wasn't as bad, and then the shoe just slides on. You know, make sure you put your shim in there, slide it on, run your screw in. Now, speaking of that screw, if you notice it had Loctite on it originally, make sure you put Loctite back on that center screw when you run it in. Snug it up real good, and then spin your pulley on your clutch to make sure it's not scrubbing on the shoe. In this case, I just put everything back just like it was, just replaced it with a new coil. Now, the way I checked this car out is much different than the way I would have done it years ago, back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even into the early 2000s. These systems, AC systems, were not computer controlled back then, and they were very easy to diagnose if you understood how they worked. And compressors back in those days cycled on and cycled off, cycled on, cycled off, with either a low pressure cycling switch on a lot of domestic cars, and your imports, a lot of them actually used a thermostat like your refrigerator. It'll kick on, and then when it's satisfied, it gets to the coolness it wants, it'll kick off. They work just like that. But today's cars are much different than that. They're variable displacement, which means those compressors stay engaged the entire time, unless something tells it to kick out, like I discussed earlier, like if you floor it, wide open throttle, that'll kick the compressor out, overheating engine. There's different things that can take it offline. But my point is, these compressors run all the time once you turn them on, and the guts, the pistons, the stroke of the piston is being adjusted by a swash plate, which is being adjusted by that electronic control valve that the computer controls. It's getting all of its feedback from these sensors, and it tells it where to put that duty cycle for those pistons. You could have a full stroke on a real hot day or just a little stroke on not so hot. It knows exactly what to do based on all the input that it's getting back from these various sensors. I love this system, absolutely love it. The only problem, there's a lot of things that could potentially go out, and it's not that hard to diagnose it. A scan tool is just about a must nowadays. Now, did I need a scan tool on this one? No, I really didn't, because of what it was. But if it wouldn't have been that, a scan tool would have been instrumental in finding that problem. I mainly did that for the sake of the video, to kind of, for anyone that don't know, to kind of educate you on a proper sequence of checking things out. In the old days, I would have went straight to the compressor, I would have went straight to the clutch, and I would have checked for voltage. If I wouldn't have had voltage, I would have backed up to the relay, the fuse, the cycling switch, the thermostat. Just wasn't a lot of things that could take it out. You know, you had a high pressure switch, it goes bad, it could take it out. But they were much simpler to work on, but those days are over. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Hope you got something from it. I'm Russ Jones with Skill Savvy DIY.